I mean, I don't care if they're Hispanic, Polish, Czechs, Germans, or whatever. If you're going to be here legal.
The immigration law was passed, I think, just simply to shut the door on the growing numbers of Hispanics in this country, pure and simple.
Congress felt that the only way to stop the illegal flow to the United States was to take away the incentive to come here, take away the jobs.
Governments tend to blame social problems when leaders are unwilling to face up to their own failures on foreigners.
When you deny a human being the right to work, you are denying them the right to survive.
Millions of people reached our ports between 1880 and 1920. Rapid industrialization in this country provided jobs attractive to Europeans fleeing hunger and joblessness. The new immigrants of a century ago came from southern and eastern Europe. They arrived, crowded like cattle, in ships that had delivered various types of cargo to Europe and were returning to the United States. Italians, Greeks, and Scandinavians labored in factories and mines and in construction. An open immigration policy at the time welcomed them. Today, however, immigrants find themselves in a situation much different from those who immigrated before World War I. 80% of the people who now seek to enter the United States are from Asia and Latin America. Mexico provides the largest number of immigrants to this country. But fear of losing control of our borders has led Congress to pass the strictest immigration reform in history. The Immigration Reform and Control Act, otherwise known as IRCA, became law in 1986. For the first time, the law allows some undocumented workers to qualify for amnesty. At the same time, employers face stiff fines, even jail, for hiring people without legal status. The law raises many questions about immigration policy. Immigration lawyer John Lott.
In the history of the United States, whenever there was a big boom, like in the 1800s and after World War II, we welcomed aliens with open arms because we needed the laborers here. But as soon as the economy turned down and the intensive labor needs ended, we got rid of them, as all other countries do. Now we have a situation where we've invited in so many people, and this has been going on for so long. Now the Congress has decided that they've got to have someone to blame for their economic failures. They've embarked upon the campaign we now see with the Immigration Reform and Control Act, where they're going to let a select group of people stay here, and in exchange the congressmen voted for the most repressive and harsh immigration legislation in the history of the country.
Many factors led to the law we have today. Immigration attorney Sarah Reinhardt explains.
I think a lot of what was behind IRCA was economic. There was a sense that the economy was in dire straits and immigrants were a convenient explanation for the economic woes. They were taking jobs away from American citizens. That was one of the things. Another one of the things was the perception that we had lost control of the borders. There had been a lot of information in the media about undocumented aliens. It was a popular topic of all the undocumented aliens in different situations. And then I think part of it too, or maybe it sort of fed off of this media attention, was a sort of a xenophobia about the increasingly third world nature of immigration to this country, which played on a lot of people's fears.
All of these cries that the borders are out of control, that we've got to regain control of our workforce, that aliens are taking jobs from Americans, is all a smokescreen. It's a smokescreen for the total failure of Congress and of the executive branch to be able to handle the economic situation in this country. And so, as in the history of the world, we are now blaming the people who are unable to defend themselves for the problems that we've brought upon ourselves.
The role immigrants play in the workplace underlies the debate on immigration policy. Many American workers view immigrants as a threat to job security.
Well, there's a lot of people that are
born in America that are unemployed. I mean, I think we should take the effort to make sure these people have jobs, whether it's union or non-union, and see that these people are working before we can put some of these illegal aliens to work. But I think we got to take care of our own first. Let these people wait in line like everybody else, you know?
I think as New Mexicans, we fought and bargained and negotiated for good wages, for our family. And yet, when you start having people coming in from across the border and they come down here and they work for cheap labor, which a lot of contractors will get for cheap labor, right? Meanwhile, here we are, working with union contractors, fair labor contractors, pay good wages. Our contractors cannot compete with an open sector because they have immigration people there that are working for less wages. That hurts my members and my family.
American businesses and industry have used immigrant labor to their advantage. Workers who have very few opportunities at home are attracted to the United States by wages that seem high in comparison to their meager earnings. Tony Anaya is a member of a congressional committee studying immigration.
The real problem is not the illegal immigrants coming across. The real problem is the fact that on this side of the border, there are many who are trying to attract them to come across, to use them for slave labor, primarily in the agricultural areas and to a lesser extent, but a great extent nonetheless, in some of the service industries, construction, hotels, motels, restaurants, and so on. But it's really the large agricultural producers in this country who love to have the illegal immigrants. If we were to force the employers in this country to simply abide by the laws we already have on the books and treat these individuals as human beings and provide them with all of the wage and fringe benefits and all of the working conditions that they're supposed to be providing, it would take away the incentive, the economic incentive, and then we would effectively put a stop to the slave labor problem. But virtually every study that has been conducted demonstrates that these undocumented, in fact, contribute more to our economy than what they take out of it.
Seasonal workers, by and large, get paid by the unit. They get by on a piecemeal type of arrangement where they get so much per unit, per harvesting unit, a bucket or sack or a pound or whatever, They might work 3 days, and then if the weather turns on them and they cannot get in the fields, then they would be off a few days, So it's a little more difficult.
And when they're not working, they don't get paid, right?
No.
The agricultural industry relies heavily on undocumented workers to maintain and pick its crops. Chile farmer Orlando Cervantes discusses the implications of the new law for agriculture.
I think certain segments of the agricultural industry, and undoubtedly the biggest segment of the agricultural industry, is very private-oriented. We're very individualistic. We're very private-oriented. And to the most part, people in agriculture have continually felt that we would be the best off with as little governmental interference as possible. I think that the intent of the law, looking at it not as an agriculturalist, but more as a citizen of the United States with interest in the country, I think that there is a need for some kind of control of people coming through our borders, I mean, to me that's very obvious. However, that concern has to be coupled with the needs of an industry. And in this case, the need of the industry also has to be met. And I think this is where I think that immigration, the Labor Department, and minimum wage, or all the other people that are involved in it, have to somehow get in harmony, get in step with one another. It seems like they're not together, Immigration's got their thing, Labor Department's got their thing, minimum wage has their thing, and they're not working together to resolve an issue. And the issue being people coming through our borders, but at the same time, they have to say, well, to do that, how do we meet the needs of this industry?
The Department of Labor, in a study that they recently published after years of studying the question, this study attempted to predict where the future labor demands would be. And they said, and this is recognized by most authorities, that the service sector is what is expanding the most in our economy. And many of our immigrant workers, that is where they are working, in the lower end of the service sector. So what that means is the demand for those sorts of jobs is going to increase and increase. And the workers, because of the employer sanctions, will not be there. So who is going to do those jobs? Who is going to work in the hotel and restaurant industries? And the laws won't be able to respond to that demand. There will be a huge demand, and the employers won't be able to respond and obtain workers.
The law's employer sanctions provision forces employers to hire people working legally in the United States. Criminal penalties can be levied against employers who fail to comply. Doug Brown, in charge of the Immigration and Naturalization Service in Albuquerque, explains.
Congress felt that the only way to stop the illegal flow to the United States was to take away the incentive to come here, take away the jobs. Now, so the employer sanctions provision of the bill is an extremely important part of it. The thing is, Congress feels, as do we, that if we are not able to enforce that part of it, then it should be removed. So we are increasing our enforcement capabilities. The Border Patrol is increasing by 50% over what they had before IRCA was passed. We are seeing over double the number of special agents that we have in Albuquerque alone to help enforce the employer sanctions provision. So it is part of the law. And again, if we cannot enforce it, then it shouldn't be there. So we have every intention of enforcing the employer sanctions provision.
Compliance will certainly not come because employers like the law. And compliance will certainly not come because that employers feel that there's a national problem here. And compliance, if it comes at all, will only come through it being bludgeoned onto the employers by the federal government. That is by massive enforcement by the Immigration Service, which would include workplace raids, subpoenas of records, visits to employers' places of business. Ultimately, though, I think if the Immigration Service pushes too hard, the law will be repealed, because the employers are the ones that control the purse strings of the politicians. And it's the employers that make the contributions into the political action committees. And it's the employers who have been fooled by their senators and congressmen into believing that this law might be a good thing.
I've heard varying, numbers for how many undocumented people there are in this country. Do you have measurements for that? How do you measure how many undocumented people there are?
How do you measure people that are hiding from you? That's what it comes down to. Estimates run anywhere from 6 million, and I think that realistically nobody would agree that there's less than 6 million in the United States, to high figures of 12, 15 million perhaps. They do not register. They do try to keep out of the limelight. They do not respond to census. Realistically, I think we could probably say there's 10, 11 million people who are illegally in the United States, certainly, by our estimates.
And those are estimates just based on what kinds of...
Well, those are guesstimates, really, before realistically. We're guessing. You can take a look at the southern borders here, and not counting all of the people who come in illegally from other places. But if you just take a look at the southern border, the Mexican nationals, we know, we've got it on photograph, we've got it on tape, 300-400 will mass at the border and then come over all at one time, knowing full well that our Border Patrol officers do not have the capability to stop everybody. It's kind of like salmon running upstream during the time of spawning. They just congregate there, and then they make a run for it, and they know that most of them are going to get through.
It's a funny thing, the numbers of aliens who were projected to be in this country illegally was tremendous, always in the millions. There were calculations that it could be as high as 12 million. And I think these figures have been bandied about for many, many years, and they in fact led to this concern, which I think was fed to a large degree by the Immigration Service, that we had lost control of our borders. And even though it was always said, we don't know for sure, but it could be 7 million, 8 million, 12 million, I mean, it just seemed to increase. The figures kept growing. And so that spurred the law. And now that the law has passed, how many people have come forward and applied? I don't know if it has even reached 2 million. Simultaneously with giving legalization to who was out there who was undocumented, the enforcement budget was increased tremendously to deal with the supposed 12 million who were out there, including the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol was doubled because there were so many undocumented aliens here and we had lost control of our border. And so there had to be, part of it was the self-preservation instinct of an agency that wants additional men, wants additional personnel and equipment and so on, and they need this and they need that. And I mean, those figures are what it was all based on.
Sin duda alguna, la ley, esta ley de inmigración se dio.
Without a doubt, this immigration law was passed with a specific purpose, and that is to stop more immigrants from coming into this country, primarily along the Mexican border. Immigration saying this: they wanted to control the Mexican border in order to stop more immigrants from coming in.
Hispanics, meanwhile, questioned why the law was passed. Jesus Rivas is a Salvadoran and a member of a refugee group in Los Angeles.
Claro, en estos últimos años ha habido un incremento.
In the past years, the Hispanic population has been increasing rapidly in this country. According to some statistics that were done, it was approximated that by the year 2020, the Hispanic population could be as high as 25%. In other words, Anglo-Saxons at 24% could become a minority. I believe that this is a racist point of view, because they are using this argument to say that we shouldn't allow any more Hispanics to come here. But that is the reality in this country, and we could say that this is one of the reasons why the law was passed. Although many congressmen supported it because it was presented as being an opportunity for millions of immigrants to legalize and stay in the United States. The Congress didn't acknowledge the other part of the law, and that is that thousands and millions of immigrants were going to be forced to leave this country because they will be denied the right to work.
In my judgment, the bottom line in terms of the immigration law having been passed was the belief on the part of some proponents that they had found an effective way of stopping the growing influence of Hispanics in this country. But that's going to have very little effect, because the growing influence of Hispanics in this country comes from natural births and from natural and legal immigration on the part of those who are here legally, and that influence is going to continue. Ironically, the influence of the illegals is also going to continue, because I don't think that the immigration law is really going to effectively stop them from coming across. Many of those who oppose or who propose the law, in fact, may have been very recent immigrants or children of very recent immigrants. They fail to recognize the fact that this country has become very strong because we are a melting pot, because we are a very diverse, culturally diverse society, and that's what makes us strong. But yet they would, now that they are here, now that they are Americans, they feel they have a right to basically shut the door on anybody that doesn't look or sound like them.
Crops are rolling and the peaches are rotting. The oranges are Adios, mis amigos, Jesus y Maria. You won't have a name when you ride the big airplane, or the